So speak life, when the sun will shine and you don't know why. Look into the eyes of the broken hearted, watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, you speak love, you speak life.
Hi there, and welcome to another edition of Dealing with Life. Very glad to have you along. This is a brand new show. It airs every week at this time. If you are dealing with struggles or know somebody who is, hang in with us for a little bit. We talk with people who have dealt with struggle and have found victory, and also found a deepened faith in the process. My name's Tom Baker. I am author of One Dog's Faith, a book about life, trust, and worry through the eyes of a dog. We'll talk a little more about that in a little bit. But with me in the studio today is Dave Gordon, very good friend of mine. Dave has been in the people business for as long as he knows. At home, he's been a foster parent to 57 different children. He's also one of the authors of Chicken Soup for the Adopted Soul. In the professional speaking community, he has earned the designation of Certified Speaking Professional. He has also been a past president of the National Speakers Association. He's got energy, he's got enthusiasm, and he smiles 99.2% of the time. Dave Gordon, nice to have you along.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We are eager to unpack your life. It's very, very, as we read there, is very complicated and also very widespread. You do a lot of things.
I started young and shined shoes when I was 12 years old, and I'm proud of that. I was a good shoe shine boy, and my kids will never go hungry because I could go to Pilot with a little wooden box, and I could make a lot of money shining shoes.
Nice. But what you do most now is you present, you teach. You're a speaker, but also you're a trainer. And you go, if I'm right, if you go to different companies and help them in their service field.
I do. We talk about guest astonishment, Tom, and guest astonishment is customer service to the umpth degree. Customer service is when you go to a local convenience store, you buy a gallon of milk and a newspaper, you give them $5, they give you back 25 cents change and say thank you. That's customer service.
Okay.
Guest astonishment is when you go to a place like the Apple Store. This really happened. And there was a trainer who I knew, and he was setting up chairs for this free workshop that I was going to. He was not going to be the trainer, and I helped him set up 10 chairs. And as a joke, as he was leaving, I said, by the way, Brian, I take my coffee black. And in about 4 minutes, he tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, Dave, be careful, it's hot. And he brought me a ceramic mug with a cup of hot coffee. And to this day, I don't know where he got it, but I sure did appreciate it. That's guest astonishment. That's exceeding expectations.
Well, you know, when I've thought about you and guest astonishment and giving more than is even necessary, equate that to how we are to serve Christ and have a servant heart.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. We are to be servant leaders. And Christ did not baptize John. John baptized Christ. Christ was a servant leader. Christ led by washing his disciples' feet, not allowing them to wash his feet.
Right.
And I think the one, obviously, that paid the ultimate price was Jesus Christ so that we can be forgiven. We mess up every day, and we know that we're covered by his blood and we're forgiven if we're believers. And so there's an old hymn, Leaning on His Everlasting Arms.
Yes.
And there have been a few times in my life when I literally can say I walked by faith and I was leaning on his everlasting arms. That's the only way I could get through a day.
Well, I mean, that's what I don't understand. There's so many people walking this earth without faith. And there have been plenty of things happen in my life, and there's plenty of things that has happened in your life where without faith, life would be completely hopeless. And I don't understand. Talk just a little, and we're going to unpack things that have happened in your life in a second, but talk in general about trying to deal with life without faith.
I can't imagine dealing with life without faith. I grew up Jewish with my old country European Jewish grandparents, and I went to Hebrew school 4 days a week. And I was bar mitzvah Jewish, and at the age of 15, I read the book that I was told not to read. I read Matthew in the New Testament. I was told not to read the New Testament.
How dare you?
And I discovered that the Messiah that I was waiting for had already been here, and if I could accept him now, I could be saved. I really don't understand how people get through tough times without faith. It's difficult enough and challenging enough when we have faith. But without faith, I don't know how people get through it. I understand people who have never heard of Jesus Christ and don't know the Lord. That I understand. But I don't understand how in America, where everyone has heard of Jesus Christ,
Yes.
where everyone has heard of God, some people think God is only part of a word. I don't understand how people can get through life without him in their life.
Yeah. I mean, it just this prescription for hopelessness to me.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I'm going to take the key and unlock the suitcase to your life a little bit.
Okay.
You have fostered 57 children. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I've been blessed and fortunate to have the opportunity to foster 57 children and adopt 2 of them. And I must tell you that in all honesty, they have given me a whole lot more than I've given them. Some of them are still in touch with me. The older ones choose to stay in touch. The younger ones we choose to let go because they have a new life now. They've been adopted or they're back with aunt and uncle or grandma and grandpa, and we want them to have their own life.
Sure.
But older ones have chosen to stay in love with us. I have a daughter who calls herself my daughter. She calls me dad. Her children call me grandpa. And I'm honored by that.
Fostering is obviously most of the time temporary.
It's always temporary if you're a foster parent. It's only permanent when you become an adoptive parent.
Right.
And you know about that because you're an adopted parent as well.
Correct.
But it's not as temporary as they like you to think it is. They say it may be a weekend, and I remember we had 2 girls for a weekend, and 3 months later they were still there. And that was okay. That was fine.
Sure. A safe and loving home that they had. But to me, fostering means you open up a whole compartment of your heart that you didn't even know was there until you meet the kids and you spend about 8 seconds with them.
Well, God has been very good to me, and I learned a long time ago from mentors, and one of them was Zig Ziglar, who most of your listeners would know of. I learned a long time ago that the only way you can pay it back is to pay it forward. So fostering was an opportunity for me to pay it forward. I grew up, at 16, I was on my own. I was in college and I was on my own.
Okay.
And I can identify with some of these children that have challenges in their life. I grew up in what today we would call a dysfunctional family, but there was dysfunctional families back in the 1800s. We just didn't have that fancy psychological word for it.
Right.
So God has given me an opportunity to love these children. And the closest that I can come to agape love, to understanding true agape love, is the way we love our children. You know, they spit up on us, they throw up on us, they poop on us, and we still love them anyway.
Yes.
And we do things that makes us very unlovable every day, and God loves us anyway.
Anyway.
That's agape love.
Such a powerful word. Anyway. I don't understand how he could love me. All right, next chapter.
I do. You're a lovable guy.
Well, bless your heart. I don't deserve it. You are also a chaplain for the Knoxville Police Department. What does that involve?
Well, it involves going to the Chaplain's Academy to be trained. It involves being one of about 40 chaplains with the Knoxville Police Department that we have a duty day once a month where we go out, and if there are any calls for a chaplain, we go on the call. Our primary responsibility is to take care of the police officer or police officers that are involved, and our second responsibility is to take care of the family that's involved. So, for example, if there's a suicide and they're not sure whether it was suicide or not, the homicide squad is called in and what have you. And our job really is to keep the family settled so the police officers can do their job.
Makes sense.
During the terrible fire that we had up in Gatlinburg, those of us that were disaster trained by the American Red Cross were able to go up there and minister to the people up there for a while.
So, is it witnessing? Is it comforting? What do you see as the common denominator?
It's definitely not witnessing.
Okay.
We're told not to proselyte at all, and we don't.
Gotcha.
We try to meet them where they are in their walk of faith, and in some cases they may not have a faith. But it's interesting. In some cases where they don't have a faith, when push comes to shove, they ask to see a chaplain.
Is that right?
Because they feel they can talk to us. They feel we protect their anonymity, which we do. And when push comes to shove, people will cry out to God.
And it's not the fact that when people say, "Oh no, here comes the chaplain," they go, "Oh, thank the Lord, here's the chaplain."
Never had that response. That doesn't mean I won't have that kind of response,
Right.
but so far haven't had that kind of response.
But you also, a big part of that job is also dealing with the men in blue.
Absolutely.
And comforting. What things do you
Well,
deal with?
I got to tell you, one of the things we do is a ride along, where we ride along for a shift one day a month. And it's interesting in the confines of a police cruiser, it's interesting what officers will talk to you about.
Oh, I bet.
Unfortunately, the divorce rate with police officers is very high, and there's logical reasons for that. No spouse wants to see their husband or wife go off in a blue uniform that has a target printed on their back, basically.
Right, day in and day out. Right.
It's very stressful. They come home, and it's hard to de-stress. They're in distress, and it's hard for them sometimes to spend lovable time with their children. And so one of the things we allow them to do is open up and tell us whatever they want, totally anonymously. And I've been pleasantly surprised at the responses I've gotten.
Well, I think PTSD, it's not only a syndrome for war combat veterans. It's also for police officers as well. They deal with
Absolutely.
a lot of things.
And in one 10-hour shift, the Knoxville police work 10 hours and they get 3 days off. They work 10 hours, 4 days, and get 3 days off. In one 10-hour shift, it's unbelievable the stress they're under.
Oh, yeah.
It may be stopping a speeding car, and they have no idea what's in that car. It may be responding to a domestic dispute, which is the most dangerous situation to put a law enforcement officer into. Because what happens is, while the husband and wife are fighting to darn near kill each other, they'll turn on the police officer.
Sure, he's in between them.
It may be responding to a simple call by a motel that's having difficulty with a guest, and you never know what you're getting into. It is unbelievable to me the amount of stress that a police officer goes through in quiet, peaceful, sweet, southern Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, and I understand that the people are calling Knoxville one of the drug capitals now, and how our police officers deal with that.
There's a tremendous drug challenge that's going on in Knoxville, yes.
Yeah. And that's got to be difficult. It's a force that's to be reckoned with. Coming up in just a minute, we're going to get inside some of the difficulties you have faced and how you have come out on top of them and with a deepened faith. And I'm so impressed with that. I can't wait to talk about that. This is a show called Dealing with Life. We're thrilled to have you along for the ride. I'm Tom Baker, and we'll be back in mere moments.
You speak life. Oh, 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 oh. You speak life. God is on the move, on the move. Hallelujah. God is on the move today.
This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker. We're really glad to have you along. In the bus with us today is Dave Gordon, who is a professional speaker. He is a chaplain for the KPD. He's 10 times. We don't have enough time to go through all the things you do and you offer to the community. But one thing I do want to talk about, this is Dealing with Life, the name of the show. You and I share one common thing. We share a lot of common things, but one thing that is in the struggle department is we've both been through a divorce. And mine was about 25 years ago, and the common factor was you got divorced after 25 years.
That's true.
And divorce is such a difficult animal, especially when the other spouse is the one that left. And so many things happen in your mind, both while it's going on and even this long from when it happened. Tell us just a little bit about what the struggles you went through personally.
Well, when my former wife told me that she was leaving, you could have knocked me over with a feather, and I'm a pretty big guy. But you literally could have knocked me over with a feather. I was blindsided. Yes, in hindsight, I saw some signs, but I denied those, and I was totally blindsided.
Yeah, that same thing happened to me. I understand that.
And the first thing I said was, if we're having challenges, we need to stay together and work them out. We don't need to separate, because when you separate, you have less chance of getting back together
Absolutely.
again. She said she was just going to move out for a while and have some space, and then we'd come back together. And looking back on it, that was not at all her
There's
intention.
no
She
way
was
to
just trying to break it to me easy.
Yeah.
To say that it tested my faith would be an understatement. It tested my faith. I cried out to God. I read the scriptures. I prayed. I tried for about a year to put things back together the best way I knew how.
Yeah.
We went to counseling. That didn't work. I tried to court her again. That didn't work. And the truth is, and this is not being negative, she's a child of God just like we all are, and we're all sinners saved by grace, but the truth is, there was nothing I could do. She changed, radically changed.
Right.
The children saw it, and now I see it, and there was nothing I could do. So I was barking up the wrong tree for quite a while,
Yeah.
and it was a real challenge and a real test of my faith.
It's difficult because, to me, divorce is the end of a lot of dreams that you had and goals and a lot of things, the plans of your life just X'd out. They're gone.
Exactly right. And the difference between death and divorce is that death is final and divorce continues.
Yeah, it just keeps rearing its head over and over and over. Yeah.
By choice, she has chosen to move out of the area to another state, and that makes it a little easier because I'm not confronted by it. She won't speak to me at all, and that's been difficult because we have 3 children. We had 57 foster children.
Right.
We have 3 grandchildren, and I would like to have communication with her.
For
but
the
she won't
children's
allow
sake.
that.
Yeah, for the children's sake. Sure.
Right.
Sure. And in your case, children were all over 18 when this occurred, but that doesn't make it any easier.
No, it was very difficult on them. I remember one of my children one night leaning against the wall. I can still see him. And he said, "Dad, this is tough on us too." And that really hurt because I realized it was very tough on them.
Sure. You picture the 4-year-old not understanding how to deal with it. When you talk about a 20-plus-year-old and their life has already got somewhat mapped out, and then you have to choose.
Exactly.
You have celebrations. You have milestones. You have all these things that before Mom and Dad just showed up.
Right.
And then they have to really almost cut their selves in half to try to please you, to try to talk to you. I mean, it's hard on them. Where do you go from there? You're happily married now, which is such a blessing.
I was blessed. I promised that I would never get married again. I was absolutely attuned to the fact, or in touch with the fact, that I didn't want to get married again. I didn't want to date. I hadn't dated in 28 years. I didn't know how to date. The world had changed dramatically, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. But God had another idea. I met a wonderful woman. She's from Alabama. I'm from Alabama. We're from different parts, but we knew some of the same people, and we've been very happily married for 5.5 years, and I'm really blessed by God.
Praise God, praise God. And speaking of that, you're an ordained minister. That's one thing we didn't even cover in your introduction. Talk about that.
Well, I am an ordained minister, but the interesting thing is, other than being a chaplain for the Knoxville Police Department, I don't function, other than filling the pulpit from time to time for a friend, I don't really function as a minister. And when I got into the speaking profession, some of my close friends would say, "Today you didn't speak, you preached," or "Today you didn't preach, you spoke," because it's a totally different skill set. And I had to separate the two.
Right.
However, I'm still able to witness in secular speaking and never mention the Bible or God.
I've heard you speak, and I've heard you do that, and it's so clever, and it's so powerful.
Thank you.
To me, and I think you could agree with this, I want you to talk about it a little bit. All of us are ministers.
We all are, indeed.
You just happen to be trained a little bit, but you don't always even have to use this knowledge that you gained about quoting Scripture or about history or whatnot. Witnessing and helping other people through difficulties sometimes is just a shoulder.
You know, Tom, it's interesting. there are times when I have to look in the mirror because I think that clergymen or ministers tattooed on my forehead. I was sitting in Starbucks one day, literally minding my own business, enjoying my latte, reading a book, and a woman at the next table turned around and said, "Excuse me, are you a minister?"
Are you serious?
And
Wow.
that has happened to me many times in my life. And I wonder, is it tattooed on me, or, what is it? And she had a theological question that she wanted answered, and I suspect she wanted it answered by someone that didn't know her. And
Sure. Yeah.
So I answered her question, and we ended up going to dinner together, only because we talked for 2 hours and it was dinner time, and nobody likes to eat alone, so I invited her to dinner. She was single, but that has happened to me many times where people just look and say, "You're a minister, aren't you?"
How about that? That's interesting. But you have had some things happen, and what we're going to talk about in the next segment is a really difficult thing in your life. But you and me and like everybody else, we've gone through struggles, and we have two choices. We can let the struggles define us and take us down, or we can let those struggles be used by God to be blessings for others.
You're absolutely right. And anyone that says they've never had a struggle in their life is lying to themselves.
Yes.
Everyone has a struggle. The richest person in the world and the poorest person in the world, while their struggles are different, they have struggles. Every one of us has 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour. It's not how we spend our time, it's how we invest our time that makes the difference.
Nice. But struggles, and I say this when I go out and speak sometimes, we have an easy chair in our house, usually everyone does, and we always want to go to that easy chair. But God never promised us comfort. We seem to always want comfort, and when we don't get that comfort, when the plans we have end up bad and we're not comfortable, God says, use that.
You're right. God never promised us that we would be comfortable all the time or that he would answer our prayers the way we think he should answer our prayers. But God did promise that he would never, I underline that, never leave us or forsake us. And God has never broken a promise.
No. I can always remember. It doesn't seem like it at the time, but when you look back, there's always this hand that's there. It's like, just take my hand. I may not pull you out, but you can hold my hand and feel the strength, and you'll make it through this.
You're exactly right. I remember being on a walk to Emmaus, which is a walk of faith that takes you from where you are to where you want to be. It's a very personal experience. And on Saturday night, I was in the chapel on my knees, and I was crying. And the next morning, one of the ministers that was on the talk as quote, staff, said, "I saw you struggle last night, and I prayed for you." I said, "I appreciate that, but I wasn't struggling at all." And he said, "It's okay. You can talk to me. You were struggling." And I said, "No, I really wasn't struggling." And he pushed. And finally, I said, "No, I'm going to tell you what I was thinking and what was going through my mind." I never felt closer to God than I was last night on my knees at the altar. And all I was praying was that God has never left me, and I prayed that he never would. And the message I got back from God, not audibly, but the message I got back in my mind was, I never have and I never will. Just don't let go of me.
Yes, that's the problem we have, is we are the ones that let go.
Exactly.
In just a minute, we're going to go to a place that's not very comfortable for you, but it's a place where other people can, I believe, gain some insight and also some inspiration. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We'll be back in just a minute.
Just hold on to the promises. Hold on to the promises. Jesus is alive, so hold tight. Hold on to the promises. You alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm.
This is a show called Dealing with Life. Very glad to have you. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith, and along with me is Dave Gordon, professional speaker, trainer, author, chaplain for the KPD, foster parent, many other things, ordained minister. I think I got most of them.
And former shoeshine boy, don't forget
Oh
that.
yeah, that should have been number one because that's the first thing you did.
That's right.
So one thing that I know you, we've been friends for a while, and I know that this is a difficult thing that you have dealt with, and this is a show called Dealing with Life. We all deal with struggles. This is a particularly difficult one for you. You, a little over 2 years ago, lost your son, Randall.
I did. Randall committed suicide. And one of the reasons that I'm a chaplain is that at 2 o'clock in the morning, a chaplain and 2 police officers visited our house to tell us about it. And I was so impressed the way the chaplain handled it that I asked Chief Roush some time later what the chaplains do, and that's how I got into being a chaplain. It was a way of paying it forward or paying back.
I say it all the time, and it's one of the most difficult things to grab onto sometimes is struggles can become blessings if we grab onto God and see the godly perspective of this. So, I mean, I can't imagine the devastation.
No, and I don't want you to. You have children, and I don't want you to ever imagine it. It's totally unnatural to lose a child. Chances are we're going to bury our parents.
Right.
Because they're older than we are.
Exactly.
However, losing a child is against the laws of nature. And Randall had a challenge with alcohol, and that certainly contributed to his suicide. But he was in pain. The good news is he knew the Lord, and I know where he is.
Oh, that's
and
tremendous.
the good news is that one day we'll be together again.
Right.
However, it was absolutely, and still is, absolutely the most painful, challenging, difficult time I've ever gone through in my life. I thought divorce was difficult, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't. I'd go through 3 more divorces, God forbid, rather than go through the death of a child.
Oh, I could see that. Yeah, absolutely.
And Randall was a jovial young man. He was a good young man. He knew the Lord. He had been married and had a child, and it's hard to imagine. And it's hard even for me to grab onto it. And I went through the memorial service, and I did the memorial service with another clergyman. And that was easy to do because I knew Randall better than anyone. And
Sure.
his brother, his older brother, shared a part of the memorial service, which blew me away. And he did it in a very positive, very uplifting way. But it was very difficult afterwards. And death really hits you after the fact. First you're in shock, then you go through grief. I was blessed. There's a program called Grief Share, which started at a church in North Carolina, has now gone all over the world.
Okay.
And West Park Baptist Church on Middlebrook Pike was holding a Grief Share. I think it's a 12 or 13 week, one night a week program. And although I don't go to church there, I called and they said anyone is welcome, and I went to that, and that helped me a great deal. I went through it twice, as a matter of fact, and now I teach part of it, or it's really not teaching, it's really facilitating. A lot of it's on video, and Zig Ziglar and his wife are part of it. They lost their oldest daughter, and so to me it was like he was talking to me from heaven, and when I called Jean one day and told her about that, she said, "He is, Dave, he is."
Wow.
And so that was extremely helpful to me. I got to meet Bob and Susan St. John, who facilitated that. Bob is a chaplain and or a minister, and we've become very dear friends. He's a wonderful, loving, giving, caring, sharing man, and Susan, his wife, is just like that, and they're a wonderful couple. And a lot of good came of that.
Well, yeah, that's such a tough place, and what. I mean, I've been in a hopeless situation, and I never considered suicide, but I saw it. I saw how people could, and that's desperate. That is so ununderstandable. But what I think people don't understand or don't consider, who are thinking of suicide, is the pain and the destruction that causes for the people. I mean, it's almost like suicide's easy because the person gets out of it on this earth, but leaves so much pain and so much difficulty afterwards.
Well, in all honesty, Tom, I can't say I've never considered suicide. I've never attempted it.
There you go.
But there have been times I've driven down the road and looked at a big old tree and thought, if the car hits that tree, it'll hurt the tree a little bit. It'll probably total the car, but I won't have to worry anymore. However, that's not the legacy that we want to leave for our family.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've never seriously considered it. And in a way, you can say it's selfish. And there are times when I've gotten a little angry at Randall for doing that. However, he was in terrible pain and distress, and I realized that he felt he had no choice.
Right.
And just for the listener's sake, he did what's called suicide by cop. He forced a policeman to shoot him in another county, and because he pulled a gun on a police officer after an hour of them talking with him and having a hostage negotiator there and doing everything they could. And the day of the memorial service, I went to the police station, and coincidentally, the officer that had shot him was on administrative leave, but he'd come in to work out. And I asked the chief, who's a good friend for a long time, I asked him if I could speak to the officer, and the officer agreed to speak to me. And it was wonderful because I was able to look him in the eyes and say, the family is not bitter at you. We don't have any bad feelings towards
Right.
you.
But how healing for him.
And I apologized that it was my son that did that. It turned out that I didn't remember this until he reminded me, but it turned out that some 4 or 5 years before that, he had twin sons who were 2 years old, and one of them pulled a dresser down on him, and it killed him. And I was the first one at the house to pray with them. We went
my
to church
goodness.
together at that time.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
it went full circle, if you will.
Yeah. And I'm sure some people don't think about it, but that is the last thing that a police officer would want to do, is actually shoot somebody.
Well, you're absolutely right. This is the first time that he'd ever shot someone. They're trained to shoot to kill. I've been through that training with the FBI, and I remember the instructor, who was a very tall, very dignified, gray-haired gentleman. I remember him starting out the day by saying, "Gentlemen, the first shot must kill the alleged perpetrator because the second shot will kill you." And in 4 days of training, he hammered that into us.
Yeah.
So when you pull a weapon, you can't shoot to wound. You got to shoot to kill.
Right.
And I understand that.
That makes sense.
I didn't like it, but I understand it.
Nobody likes that idea, but yes, it's you or them.
Right.
So in the devastation that this caused in your life, and the darkness that I know you were swimming in and reaching, where did faith come in through all this?
Well, that's where faith really came in. If ever my faith was tested, and I don't think God looks down and says, "Okay, Dave, I'm going to test your faith today." I don't think God operates that way at all.
Agreed.
But if ever my faith was tested, it was tested there. And it's interesting. My daughter-in-law, who fortunately has remarried, Randall's former wife, put together a book of memories for me for Christmas that year. Randall died on December 12th, so she had to work really fast to get that together. And it's a picture album with some blurbs on it.
Okay.
Of positive pictures of Randall and her and Randall and I and Randall and my granddaughter. And I told my wife that if anything ever happens in the house, I want that book. That's the only thing I really want.
Absolutely.
And that was the greatest gift in the world. When she gave it to me, of course, my little granddaughter was there, so I put it aside because I didn't want to cry in front of Dixie. But that gift is the greatest gift anyone could have given me, because it's positive memories. And some people who have come to the house see pictures of Randall and say, "Why don't you take those down?" And I say, "Why would I take them down?"
No.
That's part of our life. And it's great to see that picture of Randall smiling. It's great to see that picture of Randall on one of the rides at Disney World. It makes me feel good to see that. Randall was a cyclist, and he rode a couple of marathons, and I have pictures of him. I even have one in the garage of him riding in a marathon. It's great to see those positive memories.
Sure. And it's just, in one little way, it's one reminder that doesn't matter what he did, it doesn't matter anything about him, Jesus loves him.
Oh, and I know that.
Yes.
And I know one day we'll be together again, and
Yeah.
I thank God for that.
And that's comforting. It doesn't take all the pain away, but it freezes it a little bit, and you say, we're going to be together.
Exactly.
And I have prayed for you many times, and
I know
and
you
your
have,
healing.
and God answered those prayers.
We are talking with Dave Gordon. The show is called Dealing with Life, and each week we have guests who have struggles just like you do, but we talk about them, and we talk about the victory that is within every struggle and also the blessing that is within every struggle. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We'll talk in a minute.
Voice of truth says, do not be afraid. And the voice of truth says, this is for my glory. I will choose to listen and believe the voice of truth.
This is a show called Dealing with Life. Really glad to have you along. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith, and in the studio with me today is Dave Gordon, professional speaker, trainer, author, chaplain, minister, a person who's dealt with life.
Tom, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you, and you've asked me all the questions. I want to mention something and ask you to talk a little bit about it. You are the author of a wonderful new book called One Dog's Faith, and it's written from the eyes of your dog, Mango.
Mango, yeah.
And it's wonderfully written. You gave me the privilege of reading a galley proof, and then I've read the entire book. And Randy Boyd, who is the chairman of Radio Corporation of America, the Invisible Fence people.
Pet Safe, right.
He wrote a foreword to it, and he's certainly a pet lover. Louise Mandrell, who's like a sister to me, she wrote a foreword to it. Our mutual friend Halloran Hilton Hill wrote a foreword to it. And I'd like you to speak just a little bit about the book, One Dog's Faith, how people can get it, because if someone is going through worries, you're totally transparent in the book, and I think it might just help them. It's interesting. It's not coincidental that dog, spelled backwards, is God.
Is God, absolutely. Well, when I was going through a very difficult time, about 4 years ago, my church was help, although I didn't tell them very much. You know, the pride inside of me says, oh, I can't tell anybody. My wife and my family were wonderful, but I honestly found comfort in my dog. Mango is one of those dogs you look in her eyes and you see to the depths of her soul. She's sweet, she's compassionate, and I found help through her compassion, and I started watching her. And the worries that I had, I watched through her eyes, and she's like, dude, just worry about today. Stick your head out the window, enjoy the blessings that God has for you, and serve other people. Because that's what dogs do. They love others more than themselves. And they're one of the few creatures that God created that do. And that's where I found inspiration to actually write this through her eyes, because she is a servant. And when I started serving others, it took the eyes off my problem. And it was so comforting, and worry just started disappearing. And I was a terrible worrier.
Well, it's an incredible book, and I would encourage your listeners to get a copy. Neither one of us are here to sell your book, but I really think it's a great resource. I really think it's a great gift to give someone else. As a matter of fact, I'm going to buy a copy to give to my brother who has a dog and loves his dog probably more than he loves me. And I think he would agree to that. But it's a wonderful book, whether you're an animal lover or not, and it is written through the eyes of a dog. It's incredible to me how you were able to do that. When you talk about hands, you talk about paws, right. P-A-W-S, and you did a phenomenal job in doing that. And I would encourage your listeners to get a copy of it.
Thank you. It's available. One Dog's Faith, available through Amazon.
Okay.
More conveniently, it's through onedogsfaith.com, because you ordered it off the PayPal thing. I'll send you a signed copy.
There you go.
Nice.
And not only do you sign it, but Mango signs it,
Absolutely.
And I think that's incredible.
Yes, her little paw is on
Mango
there as
really
well.
does sign the book.
I have talked to a few readers, and it has been of comfort to them. Dave Gordon, thank you so much for being here.
It's a privilege to be here, Tom.
You are an inspiration. I value our friendship, and I value the positivity and the smile that you always offer, even through a phone call.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. There's two things we can look at things. We can look at it and worry. You mentioned that word before. In Philippians 4:6, it says, worry about nothing, but in all things by supplication and prayer, take it to the Lord. I take that seriously. I lean on that verse a lot.
Yep.
And I think we can look at things as problems, Problams. My dad said you can spell bad words, but you can't say them. Or we can look at them as challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed with some challenges that God has let me turn into opportunities to reach out and help others.
Well, you've taken it head on. And I see victory all over it.
Well, I appreciate that.
And praise God for you. Will you come back again sometime?
I'd be delighted to come back.
Awesome.
This hour has just flown by.
It has. It's just snap of a finger. Next week, Francis and Mark Smith will join us. They are the authors of Cleft of the Rock and Thorn in the Flesh, local authors. These are thrilling books about attempting to understand and embrace the turns in life that at the time make no sense. This is Dealing with Life. We're so glad you have been along for the ride, and hopefully you found some inspiration through it. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We'll be back here next week at this very same time. God bless you.
You speak